But you were saying, so you're active listening even when you're nodding.
Yes, absolutely. That's the whole idea. You're trying to ensure that you're getting the conversation. Sometimes actually you find yourself almost frowning because you're listening
so intently.
But when you look at the video, you're like, that did not look too demure,
I'm dead. But then you're also listening and trying to figure out what your response is, which is a difficult thing. You're doing two things at once.
Actually, it's not mostly the response, is to ensure that you don't miss something that you should follow up on. Because already we prepared the notes, you already know how it's going to flow. But then you could, in the process, you could say something that is interesting. And I don't want just to move to the next question without following up on that piece of information.
That's, I guess, that trick with that active listening, right? Because we have things that we want to get to, but you say something and we really want to tie the pieces together before we actually move on from something, because we could leave something hanging, and as a viewer watching it, you're like, I feel like naturally the next question would have been, what about X? But this person just went off to, oh, great, thanks. And now this is my next question. So I guess
felt like an exam. Okay, fine, your answer. Now let's proceed. Next question. Yeah.
So there's a balancing act there. I guess it's a bit hard to balance. Tim, before we start, do you have anything interesting from the week? Anything funny to
that's
share?
A good one.
Well, there was a 7-star performance a few days ago from a team I like.
It's football. This is going to get into a whole football discussion.
I cannot contribute.
Champions
but go
League.
On.
So that's interesting. I think that's interesting. But let's see how far the team progresses. Because I know there are some tight fixtures coming up. But we celebrate the seven goals.
I'm thinking about next season already.
but you, what about you? Anything interesting this week?
Yeah, so as I told you, I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts. So I have a long interesting thing and a short interesting thing. Which one would you guys prefer?
Short.
Okay.
I was going to say long, but I guess Tim has.
Well, I'll tell you guys the short, the long interesting thing off air, I guess.
Okay.
So Tim's not interested in that one. The question, this guy, his name is Siki Chen. He's a Silicon Valley investor, founder, been doing this for 20 plus years. He said his favorite interview question that he's asked people over the 20 years that he's been interviewing people is, what is your greatest strength that you're most worried will not come across in an interview setting?
Ooh.
Which he said he really likes because you could ask someone, what's your greatest strength? Which people ask that all the time, and it's very formal. People have rehearsed, responses. But when you ask it this way, it's a bit disarming. It makes it a bit more informal. And he says people get really excited because it's not the usual like, oh, okay, this is my strength and all that. And he really likes, also he personally has like maybe imposter syndrome, or he's anxious that when he's in an interview, he has this thing he really is strong. He has this real strength, but he's really worried it won't come across in this like 45 minutes that we have to ask, ask questions and respond. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And I don't know if that's something that you guys find any value in. It might be something that you could ask when you're interviewing people. I don't know. Any reactions to that?
What did you think yours was?
So that's a good. I figured someone would ask me that. So I took the time to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if this would be the answer, but something I would say is I think a particular strength of mine is training. Sort of training juniors, basically taking this body of knowledge and institutional knowledge and know-how and the way that we do things in the business and transmitting that to people who are new to the business and making sure that they understand it. They have buy-in. They are able to come along the journey of why we're doing what we're doing, and then paying that forward to the next generation, right? And making sure that we're not keeping all the work at our senior level because we're too afraid or we don't have enough time to train the juniors and bring them along. But how do I begin to show you or demonstrate that skill in a 45-minute interview? I just don't know how that would come across. So, but I don't know if it's my greatest strength, but it's something I feel strongly about.
So you're a teacher.
I don't know, maybe in another life.
But we're here now.
Actually. Which I think
is your channel.
Part of the reason why I do this.
Yeah.
But also, Tim, speaking of teaching, do you want to mention any teaching that you might have done recently?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Yesterday, I lectured. I'm sure by the time this episode goes live, probably it wouldn't be yesterday. But I lectured. I had a guest lecture at Riera University on mergers and acquisitions. And I totally enjoyed it. Honestly, every time I get an opportunity to do a guest lecture to students in university, I enjoy it very much because I enjoy breaking down what perhaps may be slightly complex in a way that a student who has not perhaps interacted with it before can understand and make sense of it. And that's usually a very good reward when at the end of the class, I see the students are nodding, they have a sense of what we're talking about. So that's actually something that I enjoy so much. Sometimes I think I should perhaps study a bit, get a PhD, and also teach law. But we'll see. There's time.
Hey, sign me up.
Yeah?
Maybe we can go co-teach something.
Go teach something. Absolutely. Next time, actually.
There's actually something I want to talk
along.
to you about after this, about a potential opportunity for us to lead a master class on something. Yeah.
Wonderful. Looking forward. That sounds exciting already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And yours, you know, you've been asking us and you've not told us about what is that you're afraid that will not come out.
Oh. Well, you didn't answer this question either. So.
Yeah. Well, when Adrian was speaking about it, I thought about a strength that you're afraid will not come out within 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes of an interview. For me, is that I'm a solid guy, like I'm in your corner.
You're
you know,
that guy.
when I'm in your team, I'm truly in your team.
Yeah.
I'm in your corner. So sometimes I think that's not something that can come out, in an interview or in an interaction. That you know what. I will ride with you until the wheels fall off. So yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's
interesting. That's what I thought about. I thought, was it what would it be that? I think perhaps may not come out in an interview, and that's it for me. What is it for
me?
you?
I don't know if it. How the question is phrased is very thought provoking, but for me, it's connector.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of gratification connecting the dots. So if you tell me you're interested in XYZ, and if I have someone in my Rolodex that I know has experience in XYZ, that connection brings me so much joy. And then that, follow up on like, oh my God, this conversation went so well, blah, blah, blah. We've become friends. I think that's what... I'm happy that I have a job that allows me to do that. That's actually what I do for a living. But that brings me so much joy in my personal and my professional life.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's beautiful.
A perfect segue into the episode.
Really. And it's good to know because actually the truth is some of it may not until you say it or until someone has been in your circles for long.
Yeah.
That may not come out very, very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Nice.
Amazing.
I think we are ready to go now.
Okay. So. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Full Scale Podcast. I am your host, Adrian Twatwa. I'm here joined by my co-host, Timothy Mukiti, as always. Tim, how are you doing?
Doing very well. Hi, guys.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about this episode. Today, we are hosting a guest who is deeply embedded within the Africa entrepreneurial and investment ecosystem. Her name is Michele Wanjiku.
Mm-hmm.
Michele, welcome. Karibu. Michele is the Africa Regional Lead at Endeavor Catalyst, an innovative co-investment fund that has deployed over $500 million globally and backed some of Africa's most promising high-growth companies. In Africa, the fund has invested in over 25 companies across South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Morocco, and Tunisia. Beyond Endeavor Catalyst, Michele is also a strategic advisor at Chewy Ventures, a Pan-African seed fund. And yeah, we're just very happy to have you here, Michele. Karibu sana.
I'm very excited.
Awesome. I guess let's
very excited.
Get started on just telling us, tell us a bit about yourself. Who is Michele?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into the world of startups? What do you do for fun? Just, who are you?
Awesome. So my name is Michele Wanjiku, aka Shiko, to family and friends. I've known Adrian for a very long time. So I'm going to start with that story. Because I thought that's how you'd introduce me, but I guess not.
We're sitting here like so formal, but yeah, you tell the story.
Elaborate bio, which is great. I knew Adrian in New York, and I actually know his wife. So I knew his wife first. She went to Parsons while I was at NYU and was roommates with a really good friend of, a mutual friend of ours. And I was there the first time they met. I want to say a restaurant, but it was actually a club. So.
Oh my! Okay.
Wow.
So that's we go
everything out in the streets.
Have you put this out in public that you guys met in a club?
Yeah? I hope you add this to the podcast.
It's out there now.
With dark lights and all.
Just know the love made it out of the club. That's what matters.
Yeah.
That is exactly what matters. But a New Yorker for 10 plus years, just moved back to Nairobi to head up Endeavor Catalyst for Africa. So very excited about embedding myself into this ecosystem, learning, meeting with amazing entrepreneurs, with amazing investors. I think Africa has had an intense growth period when you look at the startup ecosystem and the VC ecosystem. So it's an exciting time to be back. On the personal side, I mean, being in New York for 10 years, you become a foodie. I don't think you can exhaust the restaurants in New York at all. And there's such creative restaurants, there's such creative chefs. That is what I absolutely enjoyed about my 10 years there. I'm also an outdoor person, love hiking, love road trips. Growing up, we weren't allowed to watch TV.
Oh, wow, okay.
And even in New York, I didn't have a TV in my apartment. So spend a lot of time outdoors, spend a lot of time in nature. I think that's what brings me a lot was
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Interesting. And how did you get into the world of startups?
That was, I think, serendipitous. Very, very, very by fluke. So I started my career at JP Morgan doing public sector banking. For the most part of it. I was there for about 3.5 years. The pandemic hit. I was still in banking. You're working 24/7 in your tiny, tiny apartment. And at that time, I was covering US public sector.
Okay.
Number one, I'm not American. Number two, public sector. I mean, it was amazing, but not the most innovative space. And I think that's when I started having what one calls a quarter life crisis on what's the meaning of life? Do I want to be here for the foreseeable future? And what could I be doing other than this? And this was my first job right after uni. So I didn't know anything else. So I decided to leave banking against the counsel of my very African parents who thought I was insane. Going crazy. How are you leaving a job to go find yourself? Look in the mirror. All those things.
Finding the job was finding yourself.
Exactly.
That's enough.
You
finding
find yourself through making money. I don't know what you think you're doing. But anyways, decided to quit. And came back and spent 4 months in Kenya around 2021. And that was around the time where every other person you speak to was either an entrepreneur or VC. There was a lot of venture capital coming into the region. And that was the first time I actually heard of the word venture capital. Around that same time, my mom was retiring banking and starting her own venture capital fund, which at that time she wanted it to become she didn't think it was going to be a VC fund. It was more of an investment company. She had been an angel for a number of years. I was out of a job. So I was working with her trying to figure out, okay, you've done these couple of angel investments. How do we expand your portfolio and make a few more angel investments? So did that for 4 months. We grew that portfolio from about 6 investments to 14 just through the investment company. Wow. But a lot of that was, how do we figure out how to find the right companies, right? How do we build relationships with accelerators, with ecosystem support organizations, with other funds to start building pipeline? And so through that work is how I met Endeavor. They happened to be hiring back in New York. So I started with them supporting our entrepreneurs raise capital. So I was purely focused on a sector, which was retail and consumer tech, and supporting the entrepreneurs with access to capital. So building relationships with global funds that look at consumer tech companies and creating access for entrepreneurs with these funds.
Wow.
So did that for 2 years and now transitioned back with a different role.
Well, and that's really cool. The finding that really serendipitous and then moving back.
Yes.
And I think Tim's going to go into more on Endeavor Catalyst. But if you could speak to Endeavor as an organization, sort of what does Endeavor do more broadly? And then I guess we will get into more on Catalyst.
Yeah. So I think Endeavor is one of those peculiar organizations because we have 2 different structures. So Endeavor started 27 years ago in LATAM, and with the hypothesis that talent exists everywhere, but access to resources to actually help this talent scale does not. Resources are concentrated in hubs like Silicon Valley, New York, London, maybe Singapore. But talent exists in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, and Middle East.
Absolutely.
And so Endeavor was created to basically break down these barriers, to connect resources like mentorship, access to capital, access to talent to the best entrepreneurs in emerging markets. We did that in LATAM. We expanded throughout Eastern Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Africa with the same mission, really, to identify the entrepreneurs with the highest growth potential and then support them with mentorship and access to capital to help them scale regionally and globally. So that's how we started. 15 years into that journey, we started Endeavor Catalyst, which is Endeavor's co-investment fund designed to support the very best entrepreneurs that are part of our network. And the reason why we did that was we had done such a good job selecting the right companies from these markets, but we weren't actually investing in them. We were just helping them with mentorship, with connections, and helping them scale. And when we did a look-back analysis with the type of companies that we supported, we actually realized that we supported companies that grew up to become billion-dollar companies. And if we had invested in them at that time, we'd have made a great return. So that was part of the motivation to start Endeavor Catalyst. Another part of the motivation was, given that a lot of the work we were doing with these entrepreneurs was connecting them with global funds, and a lot of these global funds had never invested in the markets that we operated in. So had never invested in Argentina or Morocco or South Africa. And we were doing a lot of that connection for them. And they trusted our selection process, but they really asked, we'd get more comfortable if you guys had skin in the game and put your money where your mouth is. So that was also part of the reason. So we started Endeavor Catalyst in 2012. We started it with a philanthropic fund, so $10 million in philanthropic capital to test out this thesis on if we invest in the very best entrepreneurs that are already part of our network, what would the outcome be? 12 years later, we made 7x on that $10 million, cash on cash.
Wow.
And those returns
were impressive.
It's impressive.
Yeah, that's why you post so that we clap.
It's very impressive. But I think the more impressive point is that those returns were driven by entrepreneurs in Turkey, in Argentina, in Brazil. These are markets where no US or European investor in their right mind would want to invest in in 2012. They're not looking at Turkey. They're not looking at these markets. And so it really proved out that you can have great outcomes from underserved or emerging markets. So that's a bit of the history. 12 years later, we're now on Fund 4. We've made about 330 investments.
Wow.
Across 35 of the 45 markets we operate in, and have had great success doing so. And we can talk about that.
Absolutely. Wow. That's an incredible story so far.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. But there's something that you've mentioned, and I think I equally saw it on your website, that your co-investment fund.
Yes.
Perhaps you could elaborate on that concept of co-investment.
Yes.
And perhaps explain it to our audience.
Yeah. So we created that very intentionally because we wanted a mechanism that would allow us to invest in the very best of our entrepreneurs, but without making the entrepreneurs that we were picking and choosing amongst them. So remember, Endeavor at its core is just an organization or a network of high growth entrepreneurs. We support over 2,600 entrepreneurs across 45 markets, right? So we needed an investment vehicle. We needed a mechanism to help us identify who the very best entrepreneurs are that are in our network without making entrepreneurs feeling like, oh, I'm investing in you, but I'm not investing in you, and it's all subjective.
Gotcha.
So we created this rules-based mechanism to be able to actually objectively identify which entrepreneurs in our network will receive funding from us. So one, we only invest in Endeavor entrepreneurs. So first, if you're an Endeavor entrepreneur, you're eligible for an investment from Endeavor Catalyst. Two, you have to be raising more than $5 million in priced equity. So we can't invest in safes, we can't invest in convertibles.
Okay.
And then the third one is where our investment committee spends the most time, is these rounds have to be led by a qualified lead investor. So a VC or growth equity fund that has a good track record of investing, of exits, that we can then follow alongside them and alongside the way they price the deal and the terms that they set, and be comfortable doing so. So we don't follow alongside family offices. So if our Endeavor entrepreneur raises from a family office or a corporate venture fund or a DFI, we can't do that. We really want professional investors, VC or growth equity funds to lead the deal, because we don't do any extra due diligence on the deal, because we've already done all this upfront due diligence selecting these entrepreneurs into our network. So we don't have any mechanism to price a deal, to underwrite the deal, to set the terms. We just follow alongside the same terms that are set by the lead investor. So that's why we really have to trust the lead investor we're going in with. But we followed great funds as a result, because we keep that bar really, really high. So we followed alongside the likes of Excel, Tiger, General Catalyst, General Atlantic. But what is even more interesting is we're seeing professional regional funds come up. So we've also followed alongside Partech, Novastar, TLCom, and we hope that list continues to grow.
Wow, well, I like the story.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. There's a lot to parse out
like
here.
that, and actually the trajectory where you're going, you're already starting to follow into funds that are probably regional or African based.
Yes,
that's already an impressive story there, and I think there's an exciting. There's a lot of exciting things that will be happening, but maybe there's something that you've mentioned, and perhaps it's actually good for our audience also to know. Who is an Endeavor entrepreneur, and how do you determine, I guess, of course, people have figured out from your conversation, but maybe you could address that. Who is an Endeavor entrepreneur, and how should someone who wants to be an Endeavor entrepreneur, what are the important things that they need to do? Yeah.
So on our website, we say an Endeavor entrepreneur is someone who dreams big, scales fast, and paid forward. And so those are really the three pillars that we're looking at. It sounds a bit fluffy, but it really is the three pillars that we're looking at. When we say dream big, we want entrepreneurs that have global ambition. So regardless of whether you're building in Pakistan, Nigeria, South Africa, you're looking to build a regional or global company that can rival with the best companies out there. And so you have that, big ambition, big dream, audacity. That's really what we're looking for. The second thing, when we say scale fast, we're looking for companies that, with our support, can 10x from where they are. So companies that are building in a business model that we think has potential for really high growth, or building in a sector that we feel like has a potential for really high growth because of the solution or the problem that they're tackling. And so where we're catching entrepreneurs is at that inflection point where they've already proven out the product market fit locally and now need our support to expand regionally or globally. So in Series A, it's really Series A, Series B type of companies that join our network, because that's when they're looking to really scale beyond their borders. And then the third thing I would say, and probably, equal with, and we look at it with equal weight, is an entrepreneur that's looking to pay it forward. Because we believe that ecosystems are built with entrepreneurs who are willing to then go back and mentor the younger generation, invest in the younger generation, and really pave the way for the next generation of entrepreneurs. So we have this thing called the multiplier effect, and we actually quantify that. So we look at some of our entrepreneurs in our portfolio and quantify how many companies have started from their employees. Like how many of their employees have gone on to start their own startups? How many startups have they personally invested in or have they mentored? Because that's how ecosystems are built.
Yeah. Okay. So you're happy to have a guy who is losing staff.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. And how would already now you've described who an Endeavor entrepreneur is.
Yes.
So if someone was interested in, joining Endeavor and being part of that network and that part of Endeavor, what do you think they should do? Do they go to the website, apply? Of course, they will check whether they have ticked the boxes of what you've just described.
Yeah.
But what is the next step? What would they do?
So, before, and I hate to take you back, but your comment was, you're comfortable having entrepreneurs losing staff. But I think it's so important when you see the amazing companies that are being built and you see where the entrepreneur was before. For example, MoneyPoint. Tosin worked at InterSwitch, which was Africa's first unicorn before he started MoneyPoint. Lemfi, which is a remittance platform. Ridwan worked at Flutterwave and now has gone to start this incredible remittance platform. So I think, where we see a lot of potential when we're looking at who are the next entrepreneurs we want in our network, we're actually looking at like the employees of these amazing startups that already exist. It's amazing when you see the type of entrepreneurs that are birthed out of these amazing companies that already exist.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a big contributor to the multiplier effect. But to your question on how can someone engage with Endeavor, so the unique thing about Endeavor is we have local offices in each of these markets that we're in. So we are 600 staff members, and these local offices are engaging with the ecosystem on a daily basis at the very early stages of growth, right? They want to support companies, even the pipeline companies, with resources and basically building pipeline for Endeavor, right? So I think a way in which a founder who's interested in joining Endeavor contacts the local office. They're always meeting early stage startups, engaging with them, understanding their businesses, creating events for the ecosystem. Because at the core, we're ecosystem builders, right? Creating events for the ecosystem, be it early stage companies, growth stage companies, VCs. So I would say first step is contact the local office. We have a local office here in Kenya, in South Africa, in Nigeria, in Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco, and engage with them and then build the relationship. They also want to make sure they have line of sight on the best entrepreneurs, right? So they're always doing different events to engage the early stage companies.
Absolutely. So if you're ambitious, you just need to start looking for the next Endeavor office close to you.
Exactly.
And form a relationship.
Yes.
Wow. But maybe before we move from, the question around Endeavor Catalyst, I think perhaps you could let us know, what are some of your biggest success stories as Endeavor Catalyst, especially in Africa? What are some of those stories you think of and you're like, that one was exciting and we're proud of it?
Yeah. So in Africa, we have 330 investments, actually more than, I think 340 now, globally.
Yep.
And you are right to say in those markets in Africa that you mentioned, we've invested in about 27. But if you include Egypt, we've invested in about 40.
Wow, okay.
40 companies. Our first, actually even before I go there, 4 of those 40 companies have grown up to become billion-dollar companies. So MoneyPoint being one, Time Bank down in South Africa, M&T Halan in Egypt, and the fourth one, Flutterwave, of course. But what's even more exciting is that we had our first liquidity event in Africa in 2023.
Wow.
So globally, we've had 27 exits.
Okay.
Most of those exits have come from Latin America or Europe, where we have a much more developed ecosystem. And we've been there for a much longer period. But in Africa, we had our first exit in a Tunisian-based AI company. And we invested in them in 2019 when they were raising a $7 million Series A round.
You guys were looking at Tunisian-based AI companies in 2019.
Yes. I mean, Kareem was building an AI company in 2014. This company was founded in 2014.
Wow.
He was an investment banker out in Europe, had this big, audacious goal of coming back to Tunisia and starting something. And his dad, who was a medical doctor, had studied in France, moved the whole family back to Tunisia to serve his community. So he had that kind of willingness and urge to give back to his community. And he has this amazing quote that says, if you're ambitious, go to US, go to Europe and get an amazing job. But if you're mega ambitious, go back home and build a company. And that's exactly what he did.
Snaps.
Wow. Mega ambitious.
That's really cool.
That's exactly what he did in 2014. Had the goal of leveraging African talent to build an AI company. And 2019 is when we invested in him and he was raising his Series A. And he exited his company for $700 million in 2023.
Wow.
To a pharma company that they'd been working with for many years out in Europe. And what InstaDeep was able to develop with their algorithm is used for other things, but they were able to develop an early warning system to detect the different COVID variants. And obviously, COVID being a huge tailwind, this pharma company ended up buying them out. Cash deal. We made 10x on that. As Endeavor.
It's a good thing you guys started investing in your entrepreneurs.
But Kareem has then gone back he sits on our Endeavor Tunisia board. He gives his time to Endeavor entrepreneurs through mentorship. He's invested in a few. He's now trying to set up some sort of AI, academy. But he's giving back to the African ecosystem at large. And that's really, in addition to the 10x, that's also where we see success.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like he's really the poster boy for what this means, right?
Yes.
Really dreaming big, scaling fast, and then paying it forward afterwards. I honestly, there's so many things I really want to get into. Let me just tackle two. One is, you mentioned you guys only co-invest, or the Catalyst Fund only co-invests, and ideally, or really primarily, if there's another institutional investor like a growth fund or a VC that's leading the round. Which comes first? Is it sort of a chicken and the egg thing? Do you guys present the entrepreneur to them, to the sort of the VC, or does the VC identify them first and then come to you? So how does that matchmaking happen?
That's a great question. And I think it's, I'll tackle that in two ways. First, it's worth remembering that Endeavor Catalyst is just a small value add piece of Endeavor. The main work that we do with our entrepreneurs is helping them get the right investor. So we help them get investor ready. We create mentorships for them where they can pitch and get candid feedback from other investors or other entrepreneurs who are further along in their journey. We actually work together with them to build an investor list of funds that would be a great fit for them. And then we make the introductions on their behalf. Because on the other side of the what we do is spend time with all these funds globally and regionally, understanding what their mandate is, understanding who else they've invested in, what they want to see in companies, what sectors that they're excited about, what stage they play in. And so we basically act as a connector. So in some cases, yes, for our Endeavor entrepreneurs, we're the ones who introduce, in many cases actually, we're the ones who introduce them to their lead investor. But for our co-investment strategy to work, the Endeavor entrepreneur has to want us in, and in 100% of the cases they do, because we add a lot of value. And the investor has to let us in, because we are trying to get into highly competitive rounds. For example, we just invested in Lemfi, which was a highly, highly competitive round. Ridwan is an Endeavor entrepreneur. He wanted us in, but his lead investor had to make space for us and let us in.
Yeah.
So that's really how it works. So sometimes the entrepreneur finds the lead investor and, on their own, but we have to make sure that we have really good relationships with the top investors globally and regionally for them to actually make space for Endeavor, because a lot of the rounds we invest in are oversubscribed and highly competitive.
Got you. And I think that just speaks to the quality of the entrepreneurs
Absolutely.
and the
Exactly.
businesses.
And equally explains the 10x.
Yeah. A quick one on the multiplier effect, which I guess you guys somehow have found a way to quantify this internally and sort of even put a number to this. If you could just give us, is there any example of a particular person or just an example of where you've seen the multiplier effect just go so crazy? It's maybe this one person happened to be the person who led this person's round, who happened to be the one who founded this thing. Is there any connection or like a map you could draw us of just one multiplier effect in action?
Oh, that's a hard one. I will say we have it on our website, so it's really cool. It's really cool to go check out. I feel like I'll watch it if I try and do it myself. But basically where the idea came from is the PayPal mafia out in Silicon Valley.
Okay, got you.
And how so many companies were birthed out of not just the founders of PayPal, but also the staff who worked at PayPal.
Yeah.
You had Reid Hoffman, who came out of PayPal, who went to start LinkedIn, David Sachs. I mean, the list goes on and on. Elon Musk himself.
The OG multiplier
effect.
Yeah.
But what we realize is that these mafias take place with the biggest players out, even in emerging markets. So Mercado Libre is a company that we supported from very, very early days. It's a Latin America, basically building the eBay of Latin America. It's now listed on the public stock exchange with a market cap of $100 billion.
Wow.
But the amount of companies that have come out of Mercado Libre, and not just companies from their staff, but companies that the founders have also invested in. One of the founders went to start Kazek, which is probably the best regional fund in Latin America. And he's gone on to become not just a founder, but now a funder in the ecosystem. So I'm sure we don't even exhaust, because you can't
I feel like it could go on and on.
You can go on and on. Yeah. And so we've done that for a number of our African entrepreneurs. Ken is an amazing one. We had him at an event last year. We had Ken Njoroge of Cellulant. We had an event last year, an investor breakfast, and he was talking about the multiplier effect. And he said he counted that about, I think it was over 40 startups had been started from Cellulant staff.
From the original Cellulant. Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, which is 40. Incredible.
Absolutely incredible.
So sorry, again, sidetrack. So internally, if you have like a list of like the top multiplier effect people, is the Mercado Libre guy like the number one?
He's like, yes, he's out.
I mean, if you started a fund and now there's no way to even like that just exponentially touches all these other people out there.
Exactly. And so we actually did a bubble map of Latin America.
Yeah.
And we mapped out, basically the multiplier effect of the biggest companies, the biggest startups in Latin America, and how many companies have sprouted from them. And then we removed those big bubbles, and without them and the companies that they've impacted, there's nothing. So so yes, they are some of our big ones. In Africa, Flutterwave, there's so many startups that have come out of people who've worked at Flutterwave, people who've worked at InterSwitch is another great one. But it will keep going.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. Fantastic. Amazing. Yeah. I think we can go to the to the next question, because I think we can always go on, and it's very exciting conversation about that, the impact that you're having already. I mean, this is exciting. I could just literally sit here and nod.
We're gonna
You said no nodding.
I could sit here and nod all
We're
day.
We're going to have her back for episode 2 for the second part
But
2.
check out the Multiplier Effect website. It's super cool, interactive, and you get to see it all play out.
Okay. Adrian, do you want to take us through the state of venture capital in Africa?
Actually, I guess only question on that really is sort of how, based on your experience so far on the continent, what Endeavor is doing in LATAM. Sort of basically this 30,000-foot view of the investment landscape. Specifically with respect to Africa, have you seen that evolving since the time that you've been involved in investing? And, how has that changed over time? And perhaps, how do you see that going forward? Like, are there any particular trends that you're seeing, or how do you think the landscape's going to change?
So it's interesting that you make this comparison between LATAM and Africa, because we were in Lagos last week. And I guess when this episode airs, it's not last week, but we were in Lagos last week meeting with the ecosystem. So high net worth individuals, family offices, entrepreneurs. And basically the narrative that we were telling was Brazil is so similar to what's happening in Nigeria right now. And Endeavor has been in Brazil since 2000, when there was nothing happening in the VC ecosystem. Barely any VC dollars. VC was virtually non-existent. It was probably, $200 million annually. Fast forward to 2013, New Bank was started, which is a digital fintech company. It was started in 2013. It became a $1 billion company in 2019. IPO'd a couple of years later. And now you look at Brazil, there are $25 billion companies in Brazil. Wow. 19 of them Endeavor's invested in.
Naturally.
So we know that there are 25. But the message that we were trying to kind of communicate to folks in Nigeria is Brazil is a market with over 200 million people. There are not many countries around the world with that sort of scale and population. And with those 200 million people, there's a lot of problems to solve. Indonesia is a huge market. Nigeria is a huge market. We're seeing the VC ecosystem rapidly scale in Indonesia. I think there are now $15 billion companies in Indonesia. In Africa, most of the unicorns, and not saying unicorns is a mark of success, but it's an easy kind of, it's an easy reference to make. But most of the unicorns in Africa are in Nigeria. Nigeria has a population. Not many African countries have that level, have that amount of scale. So the message we're trying to communicate is it takes time. It took us 24 years in Brazil to get to where we are. From $200 million in VC dollars coming in 2000 to $25 billion companies to date. So I think the trends. So in terms of commitment to these ecosystems, it's important to have. I think you only see those returns if you stay the long haul. But then we also did this study on what we call waves of innovation, and we have it on our website in our investor report that we published a couple of weeks ago, and looking at how what type of waves happen in these emerging market ecosystems. So the first wave really being innovation at the consumer level layer. So consumer-facing businesses, payments that enable kind of those consumer-facing businesses, logistics that enable the consumer-facing businesses to get the goods around. And then the second layer of innovation really happens now at the enterprise level. So the more developed, our more developed markets, we see a lot of B2B software type of businesses, but our more emerging markets, we see a lot more of B2C, and if it's B2B, it's more, kind of enabling the SME mom and pop shops.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, now perhaps let's talk about scaling in Africa.
Yeah.
And the question I'm going to ask perhaps does not apply to Endeavor entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Because they're ambitious, they want to grow globally. But many African startups struggle to go beyond their home markets.
Okay.
Maybe it's a Ugandan startup struggles to cross the borders, even to East Africa. Maybe it's a Kenyan one. In your experience, what do you think are the biggest challenges for startups when it comes to regional expansion going into other markets? Yeah.
So I think we are 54 countries.
Yeah.
So fragmentation, different legal systems, different banking systems, licenses, etc., etc., etc. Where markets like Egypt, Nigeria, and even South Africa have a bit of a leg up is that startups don't have to expand too quickly because they have the scale in country to
the
build.
Local market can even enable them to scale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The local market is big enough for them to build a big business.
Yeah.
A lot of these huge Nigerian companies we talk about, majority of their revenues are coming from Nigeria. Egypt is a big enough market to build a big business. South Africa is a big enough market to build a really big business. When you look at Kenya, where 50 million people, yes, ease of doing business is maybe a bit easier than a Nigeria, but companies have to think about expansion much sooner than a Nigerian company has to think about expansion. And so with that comes a lot of challenges. You're thinking about what does the regulatory environment look like in the country you're going to. You also need to hire for talent in that country, a country manager, etc. If you're a fintech, you're thinking about licensing and building the right relationships. So at Endeavor, that's what, we support companies across 3 pillars. And it's access to capital, access to talent, but access to market is a really huge one, right? And so we build the right relationships for entrepreneurs so that when they are expanding from Kenya to South Africa or from Kenya to Egypt, they can rely on Endeavor to introduce them to the right people, regulators, policymakers, bankers, lawyers, etc. And so kind of doing that legwork for the entrepreneur so they don't have to, and making the entry into the market much easier for them.
Yeah, that's fast. And I guess that's also why you then target those companies that are already past the MVP stage and they're now ready to just get turbocharged and really scale across the markets because you have that capability.
Exactly.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Wonderful. That's a good perspective, actually. And it's good to see it. So what I'm getting is Kenyans should increase in population.
Yes, have more babies.
People should get more babies anyway. But indeed, but it's good that you provide that form of support in terms of, access to capital, talent, and as well as expansion into other markets.
Yes.
So which is great for any entrepreneur who becomes part of the, part of Endeavor.
Yeah. And a big one is also scaling yourself as a leader. Like, I think people underestimate how rapidly a founder has to upskill themselves and scale themselves as a leader. You're not the same person who started that company is not the same person who's not the same person that's needed for the Series A, not the same, even you as an individual. You have to change so much on how you lead, how you think about the growth of your company. So we do a lot of work with helping our founders scale because we do want to see them stay the course of their business, right? We want to see them be the same founder that takes them to the company to IPO and not a professional CEO coming to lead the company, although we do have some of those cases. So a lot of the work we do is helping the founder themselves scale so that they can be the right entrepreneur to take their business to the next stage of growth.
Wow. Scaling yourself. Wow. That's fantastic, honestly. It sounds like Endeavor's theory of change is sort of find these high impact individuals, supercharge them, and they're the ones who are going to create or basically enable the ecosystem to grow and flourish.
Exactly.
Inevitably, there are going to be mistakes people make along the way. I'm sure you see entrepreneurs make a lot of mistakes even before they come in to become Endeavor entrepreneurs. Are there common mistakes that you've seen or like themes in terms of pitfalls, tripwires, things that people keep doing that you see, particularly in the African ecosystem that perhaps you could speak on and maybe it will help founders out there that are trying to do things to not make these same mistakes?
Yeah. The one we spend the most time around is capital. And the message we try and hone in on is getting the right investor is so critical at every stage of your business. And when there's misalignment with the investor and the founder, that can just cause devastation. So I think it's really important. It's not just about money, it's about smart capital. Do these investors, first of all, are you aligned in the way you want to grow this company? Do these investors have the right networks and skill set to get you there?
Yeah.
And are these people that you can call when you're in a tough time? So a lot of the time we spend with founders who are in a very, very, very tough spot is when they didn't bring the right investor into their business, and the investor is completely misaligned, and there's no way forward. I think that's one. The second one is being very cognizant as a founder on how much dilution you're taking. And it sounds, you guys are lawyers, it sounds very easy, but it's not. And I think where a lot of founders got caught up, especially in 2021 and 2022, was chasing valuation. Money is hot, money is easy. You raise safe after safe after safe after safe.
Yeah.
For higher and higher and higher valuation, but you've not even taken a second to figure out
how much is left.
Exactly, how much of your own company you actually own.
Okay, when they all convert, you realize you have 5% or 3%. Yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. And then, I mean, the second layer of disappointment is when you realize you can't grow into the valuation that you've already set for yourself. You now need more money, and you have to cut your valuation by 50%, 60% to bring in new investors. Okay, fine. And then the third thing is realizing if you're now over diluted, how much do you need to grow and exit for you yourself to make money? Because there's a waterfall of investors.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The person who's getting paid first is your growth stage investor, then your early stage, then your seed stage. You're being paid last.
Yeah.
So I think just understanding what dilution you're taking. And then on the investor side, being founder friendly, because I think if you're misaligned with your entrepreneur, if you've squeezed your entrepreneur so much, what is the incentive for them to stay and build this business?
Yeah.
Really? So I think where we're now starting to see, and what we advise founders against, founders have been scared to take that valuation cut and kind of reset. And so then take on more punitive kind of terms in order to keep that valuation artificially high. And in the long run, that hurts your business, hurts your own economics. So I think keeping it as vanilla as possible. Don't over-engineer these things just so you can keep your valuation at X, but now you have a 2X lick pref and all these other things that in the end of the day actually screw you over. So don't be afraid of down rounds. If you have to take them, keep your rounds as vanilla as possible, especially early and kind of growth stage. You shouldn't be doing so many complex out-of-the-box things. And bring in the right investor. Do a lot of due diligence. The same amount of due diligence they're doing on you, do on them.
Amazing.
Absolutely. That's impressive.
Thank you. Yeah.
Actually, I was listening, and I've actually seen scenarios of where misalignment between investor and founder has gotten very problematic pretty quick.
Yeah.
And usually sometimes it almost spells an end. because people get impatient. They send each other very strongly worded emails, and that wastes so much time because the founder needs to focus on building the business.
Yeah.
But you're spending a lot of time putting out fires.
Investor relations.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a quick one. If we were to transport you into the future, right?
God.
And we were to put you in a room full of the next generation of high impact entrepreneurs, right? The potential endeavor entrepreneurs of the future for the continent. What is the one thing you would say to them? So this is our founder's time capsule, essentially. We're putting together little bits of advice or words of wisdom for that group of people. So if you had to say just one thing to them, what would that be?
So can I say a story and then I would say, let me actually start with what I would say. I would say you can build a global business from anywhere.
Okay.
And we say this at Endeavor. This is like our slogans, blah, blah, blah. But I had an incredible aha moment not too long ago. I was speaking to one of our founders, the founder of Lemfi. And we were, he's building a remittance platform that allows people in diaspora to send money back. And I said something to the effect of, oh, it's so amazing that you're building this tool for African diaspora to send money back to Africa. But how are you competitive to the other African solutions, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he's like, why are you assuming I'm building an African company? I'm building a global company.
Wow.
And so he challenged my biases.
Wow.
Because I do think even I have that bias on, if you're building out of Nigeria, you're serving the African market. If you're building out of South Africa, you're serving the South African market or the African market. But more and more, we're seeing African entrepreneurs challenge that. We have an amazing company out of South Africa called Time Bank. They're a neobank. They just became a unicorn. They expanded. Their second market after South Africa was Philippines. And they were the fastest growing neobank in Philippines. They're now expanding across Asia.
Wow.
So really, I think you can build for the globe. Yeah, that's what I would.
I think we have our.
That's what I would say.
We have our quote for the thumbnail.
Actually, we do have. We can build for the world from anywhere.
Yeah, and
From
what makes
anywhere.
you think I'm building a company just for Africa?
Okay, so here is a surprise question, and it's not such a surprise
Yes.
if you've caught up with a couple of the previous episodes. But we like to ask this question, but we will change it so that next guests do not come here with
I'm
already
scared.
premeditated answers. But if you were to have a superpower,
Ooh.
what would that superpower be, and why would you want to have that superpower?
I have to think.
Right.
Let me take 1 minute.
Take your time. We'll just edit it out.
Yeah.
My superpower, if I could have any superpower, would be communication. And we do a lot of presenting publicly in Endeavor. We present at our investor meetings. We have dinners where we speak about Endeavor. We're constantly communicating what our mission is. And last year, we presented at our annual investor meeting in Silicon Valley. And I get nervous public speaking, like anyone does. And I asked my colleague, I was like, I would love your feedback on how I did, or, how he's an amazing communicator, or how do you get comfortable on stage? And he said, my KPI for public presentation is I want someone out of that audience to come and offer me a job just because of how well I presented or communicated. And I think the power of communication and presentation, honestly, you can sell
anything.
You can sell anything.
Okay.
You can sell air.
Yeah.
I think communication, presentation, aura, but communication, especially getting your point across in a concise, powerful way, is the biggest superpower.
Wow.
In my eyes.
That's amazing.
That's
I think
amazing.
That's a really cool one.
Yeah,
And
interesting. Yeah.
storytelling is something that I find so fascinating, and I look to the people who are amazing storytellers, not necessarily in books or in art forms, but just in orating and speaking and getting a point across. And I think you're a great storyteller.
Oh, thank you.
So keep at it. I think
you already have your superpower.
Yeah, I think you already have it. So
you can 10x.
You might need
can 10x. Yeah.
High impact. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So I think you're already very fantastic at the sort of the gift of gab, if that were it. So yeah, just keep on doing it. And this is a good way for us. We practice our storytelling on here every time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I
At
think,
least we get an opportunity.
Yeah.
Every once in a while.
Something that in everything you do, really, your job, interview, whatever, you're always telling a story. So
yes, you are.
Amazing.
You are.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much the show. Is there anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for your time. This conversation could go on and on.
It really could.
It's full of gems and insights.
To do a part 2.
Yeah, and definitely we'll do a part 2.
Happy to.
Will invite you because I think there's so much to speak, especially for African entrepreneurs. There's so much to learn, and there's so much growth they can get and glean some nuggets from this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't know if our audience wanted to interact and engage more with you. Where can they find you? Maybe
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
Yeah. LinkedIn.
That's it. Don't want them to be on your Instagram. Okay, wonderful. So if you want to engage with Michele, just look for her on LinkedIn, and perhaps you can connect and share some more.
And your local Endeavor office, right?
Yeah, and your local Endeavor office.
Yeah.
I know there's one in Kenya, so Google where you can find it and
exactly.
go look for them and perhaps become an Endeavor entrepreneur. But don't go in unless you have ambition to go global. Otherwise, Okay, absolutely. So as we tidy it up and wrap it up, please don't forget to like, comment. Let us know what you thought was interesting or anything you think we should cover some more at a future date. Also share and subscribe on our YouTube and on all other platforms. You can share this with your enemies, especially, and your friends as well. And we look forward to the next time.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.